Democratic Socialist Mayor Mamdani's new $127 billion budget filled with racial equity, bureaucracy, and six-figure diversity jobs, and he'll pay for it by raising taxes and canceling plans to add thousands of NYPD cops.
But everyone isn't on board.
Think about the senior citizens who's living on the margins already. We have a food insecurity issue. People are struggling out there, and this is a non-starter.
He should be decreasing spending that isn't improving New Yorkers' lives. That's where he should be focused now. Not increasing taxes, but decreasing unuseful spending.
Okay, so I want to bring you an update on this whole Mamdani tax increase, budget crisis situation, because to put it shortly, it's being exposed right now that Mamdani is scamming and lying to you about this, which I know is a big surprise to everyone. But what's happened is that people have started to dig through the weeds of what is actually in this ridiculous $127 billion budget proposal that Mamdani has brought. Keep in mind, this is the very budget he's claiming is essential. And I'm sorry, but it's an existential crisis, and we're gonna have to raise property taxes on ordinary New Yorkers because Albany is refusing to raise income taxes on the rich. And what he's telling you is there's no other way, right? There's $1 billion shortfall in the state's treasury, and we're doing all we can, but we're so sorry. We're going to have to raise taxes to keep the city functioning, is the way this is being framed. Except when you look at what's actually in this budget, you find that's not really true at all. As a matter of fact, we're finding billions of dollars being spent on stupid, wasteful DEI offices, as one example. I know, so essential, right? Simultaneously, the police, for whatever reason, is being defunded, but not these massive, over-bloated social services and all that. And it really does vindicate the theory I've been pushing lately that the reason why Democrats never deliver on their promise to say, hey, we may raise your taxes, but we're going to make your life better, we're going to improve social services, and that never happens, is because they quite literally take the extra tax money and spend it on this ridiculous nonsense, right? Essentially the money laundering to set up millions of dollars of DEI projects, and they don't accomplish anything and nothing gets done. And hey, all of our construction keeps getting delayed, and then they keep overbilling the government over and over again. Why? Because the Democrat Party is essentially a mass money laundering criminal organization. And that's what's going on right here, frankly, with this new government budget that Mamdani's claiming, oh, we can't cut any more from the budget because then the city would go underwater. Oh, really? You can't cut the Office of Racial Equity or the Commission on Racial Equity? By the way, why do they need both an office and a commission for the same exact thing as one example? Yeah. So we'll get into this here today. I also want to tell you about maybe some of the inner politics going on right now in the city, because it appears that multiple city council leaders are starting to rebel against Mamdani's idiotic proposal to raise the property tax, claiming it's absolutely necessary. No, it's not necessary for the functioning of the government, right? It's necessary for your socialist agenda, right? Is what's essentially here going on. And basically they're saying they refuse to vote for this. We'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, to make a long story short, I don't think it's exactly all that good of politics to get into office and immediately declare that you're going to be raising property taxes on everyone after campaigning on affordability. But hey, who knows? This is what a bunch of clowns in New York City voted for. I would venture to guess that many of his voter base, much of his voter base, a lot of his electorate probably doesn't own property to begin with. But hey, we'll talk about this here today, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, okay, let's check in on the $127 billion budget that, I repeat, Mamdani's claiming is absolutely necessary, right? This is despite the fact that it's way more than the government budget of the whole state of Florida, which has nearly 3 times the amount of people. But hey, I get it. New York is a metropolitan area. They have infrastructure. Except when you delve into this, you realize, again, what he's claiming we absolutely have no other choice than to raise your taxes over, you find out is pretty utterly ridiculous. So take a listen to apparently what's in this budget proposal.
Equity, $4.6 million, Commission on Racial Equity, $835,000, Commission on Gender Equity, $260,000 for Department of Education, Chief Diversity Officer, $301,000 for 3 FDNY civilian chief diversity inclusion officers. There's a title for you. And $118,000 for an FDNY chief diversity inclusion officers. Is that necessary stuff? You can't cut that back?
And a list of things to do when it comes to public safety? Absolutely not. Public safety's got to be in the top of your list. So we can't pay for everything. Everything can't be for free. But what you need is cops out in the street. Tell me how all these programs are going to help when you're getting robbed in the middle of the street.
Yeah, and
Tell me how it works.
Yeah, you tell me. Believe me, he's about to find out, sadly. Mamdani's progressive agenda includes new budgets items like $750,000 for art and cultural fund, $800,000 for anti-ageism, $437 million for child care vouchers, LGBTQ emergency for $2 million. It goes on. And you pointed out his climate change budget. What's he spending on that?
Yeah, see, normally in a real budget crisis, you would think that some of these things would be the first to go. You know, for example, does the Office of Racial Equity really need $5.6 million? And by the way, if there's already an office, then why do you need $4.6 million for a commission on racial equity? It makes no sense. Typically, a bunch of these useless bureaucrats are the first people to get furloughed in a genuine crisis. But after all, I think you're starting to see what this is really about. Worth noting as well, okay? So we're out of money according to them. But Mamdani, on top of just what previously existed in New York, is adding new funding, in some cases millions of dollars for these DEI projects, like giving it to art and culture. Really? Is that what you're spending money on when you're in a huge budget deficit and you're trying to figure out where to come up with the money, right? Fighting ageism, climate change. I mean, what's going on here, right? But I think you start to notice something is that truly there is no actual budget crisis in New York City. It's being entirely manufactured. And so if you look at, hey, why is Mamdani not defunding this? Wouldn't that make sense? Ideological reasons? No. Please keep this in mind, right? The $127 billion budget is actually a huge increase even from the last fiscal year, okay? So you would think at least, okay, can we keep the current budget? No, he's expanding on the current budget while claiming we're in a deficit. What does that mean? It's a crisis he's creating by his own hands. Is he creating it because he's incompetent? I actually think no there. It is a purposeful thing, and by the way, the far left does this very often, where they essentially try to break something on purpose to force action and say, oh, you have to embrace socialism now. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, right? Mamdani's agenda this whole time has been he wants to raise taxes, whether that's on rich people or the quote-unquote working class. It doesn't matter. Socialists end up raising taxes on everybody in the end, right? But obviously, as we have previously covered, Albany, the state government, does not want to do it. Kathy Hochul doesn't want to do it. She's campaigning right now in her re-election campaign on no new taxes. And so what can Mamdani do to try to manufacture the support in order to raise taxes? Well, let's claim we're in a budget crisis because look at what we have to do. And please try not to pay attention to the fact that this budget crisis is being entirely created, right, by our lack of own fiscal responsibility. You see what I'm saying there? And it's pretty convenient, actually, in the process. He's managing to fulfill, through this fake budget crisis that he created, a lot of his own ideological initiatives. Because you notice, obviously, that the DEI funding is not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, it's only increasing. But simultaneously, while he's increasing funds for all of this woke social left-wing stuff, I pointed out to you yesterday, he is at the same time defunding the police, claiming the budget crisis as the excuse to why he's doing that, right? The same budget crisis he won't, cut DEI for. See what I'm saying? It's actually a prime political example of how you use a fake manufactured crisis to ram your ideology down everyone. Because I think what Democrats have frankly started to notice is that, well, as it pertains to crime and policing, these BLM slogans of defund or abolish the police are extremely unpopular. People generally want you to be tough on crime. They've seen what happened to American cities since 2020. They don't want to go back. And so Mamdani, as you noticed in the campaign, was a little bit silent about some of his past policing positions. He actually claimed that he moderated. And so you may be asking the question, okay, is he going to be fine? Is he going to be common sense? Maybe he's not so bad anymore. No. You see what I'm saying here? His agenda was always to defund the police. He's just finding a different way to do it. And oh, what a convenient excuse. We have to make cuts because of the budget crisis. Well, you're not making cuts to anything else. Why is the police, by the way, the first thing you think to cut, right? I would say if I was running a city and we had to genuinely make cuts, we're in a budget crisis, probably police, fire department, emergency services is the last thing you should touch, not the first thing. But as we brought you this news yesterday, right? New York City Mayor Mamdani is looking to get the Big Apple on a tighter budget, according to him, and seems to see cuts first and foremost, before cutting DEI, right, to the NYPD, as a way of getting the city on track. Mamdani's predecessor, Eric Adams, had proposed at the end of his term that the city hire 5,000 more NYPD officers, which they desperately need. However, upon entering office, Mamdani had moved to cancel that order.
Absolutely not surprised. His whole team is not a big fan of the NYPD. I truly don't think he knows anything about public safety. And now you're going to cut back 5,000. We need about 40,000, and we're roughly close to 34,000. So cutting back 5,000, and we're probably going to lose another close to 4,000 like last year. Recipe for disaster. Public safety is the key to New York City.
Additionally, in the preliminary fiscal year 2027 budget, it notes the importance of significantly reducing current vacancies, which could include reductions in funding for NYPD based on unfilled positions. So Mamdani's essentially writing the fiscal year 2027 in a way to make sure it defunds the police without directly saying it's defunding the police, right? No, we're reducing vacancies, and that's going to mean this reduction, that reduction. It sounds so complicated, but right, what happens in the end? What is the end effect? The police gets defunded. The Gothamist, a New York-based publication, noted that Mamdani's budget proposal includes a $22 million decrease in the NYPD's budget for next year, right? So you notice all the fancy ways he's using to do this? He's not directly saying, I'm going to defund the police. Again, Democrats understand that publicly taking these pro-crime stances is highly unpopular with people. It's even causing backlash in deep blue cities. But of course, that's a way to do it subtly. By the way, I warned everyone, hey, as it pertains to Mamdani's mayorship in New York City, probably the thing that you're going to be hardest hit by, believe it or not, is not necessarily even the socialism stuff. It's the crime stuff, because that's immediately the place where he can immediately make the police stand down. And look, that's what he's doing right now as we're talking, right? That said, let's tell you now about the situation in the New York City Council, because things are starting to get interesting here.
Good morning to the both of you. And that's as the City Council appears to be against Mayor Mamdani's budget proposal of raising property taxes by 9.5%. The mayor saying, however, this is a last-ditch effort in order to close in on that $5 billion budget gap that the city is facing.
Apparently, he's now getting backlash from members of the council. Council speaker, so the leader of the City Council here, Julie Menon, and Finance Committee Chair Linda Lee have promptly poured cold water on Mamdani's property tax ploy. Again, this is the ploy to say, well, because we have to spend millions on TEI, that's why I have to raise your taxes while I'm, of course, defunding the police. Hey, have you considered taking the money that you're using to defund the police and putting that toward the city budget? Oh, I doubt it. No, it's going to go to the DEI money laundering, right? But in an interview, Lee here noted that the property tax increase would have a negative effect on a lot of homeowners in her district in Eastern Queens and others. Gee, you don't say. Not only that, the proposal would exacerbate the fiscal problems of rent-stabilized housing even before Mamdani's proposed freeze on rents, which I think also is a very ironic part to point out about this. So if you remember, Mamdani's big promise, which he's still yet to even touch on the campaign trail, is he was going to freeze the rent for rent-stabilized housing. Now, this is essentially imagine Section 8, but for the middle class, right? This is where, your property is owned by a private landlord, but essentially it's price controlled and regulated there by the government. Mamdani's saying, I'm going to freeze the rent. Now, the huge economic problem with freezing the rent is that in a city where costs are already going up, why would you want to be a landlord when the government is basically imposing price controls on what you can actually rent to people, right? You'd see probably many cases where that landlord says, oh, I'm going to go under, I can't, manage my costs anymore, so I'm just going to sell this place. And then guess what you have in the end? Less rent-controlled housing. So you can freeze the rent, it's just there's not going to be any rent-controlled apartments to even find because you price the landlords out of the market by doing that. Okay, we understand that. Now, that said, okay, keep in mind, again, that's one of his big campaign promises. I'm going to freeze the rent. And this high IQ genius is now responding by saying, oh, let's raise property tax. In other words, let's make it even harder for the rent-stabilized landlords who, we're claiming we're going to be freezing the rent for. And then surely nothing will go wrong there. Surely the landlords won't just pack up and leave and start investing in real estate in another state. Yeah, idiotic, right? But anyways, Mamdani's announcement risks annoying voters without gaining meaningful leverage over Hochul in the legislature. I mean, that's true as well. Because deep down, you think Kathy Hochul wants you, who is from the more establishment wing of the Democrat Party, you think she wants you, this upstart progressive, to succeed? No. As a matter of fact, I think she would laugh at you ultimately if you failed, right? That'd be a vindication in this case of the establishment Democrats who said they weren't going to raise taxes, at least as it pertains to local politics. So anyways, neither would appreciate being strong-armed by the mayor. Now, it's worth noting the mayor, Mamdani here, asserted that there is no third way, but of course there is. As we pointed out, you could actually just make cuts to the city budget. Mamdani's claiming we can't afford any more cuts. We just showed you several cuts you can't afford, right? As noted in the statement, the city can reduce spending and raise new revenues. Previous mayors had closed budget gaps with PEG cuts, an acronym for Program to Eliminate the Gap. Agencies would be assigned targets representing percentage reduction in the expense and capital budgets. In other words, the agencies, the overbloated government agencies here would have to actually do a Doge, right? They'd have to actually say, who do we not need? How can we reduce budgets? Do these people need to be making $200,000-$300,000 a year to do nothing? But of course, that goes against Mamdani's ideology. The whole ideology of Mamdani is let's give out a bunch of public jobs to people for the sake of money laundering and keeping them happy and keeping them voting for us. That's what socialists tend to do a lot. But the mayor dubiously here stated that the agencies could not tolerate larger cuts and sustain services. So what Mamdani's claiming is that there's no way the city is going to function, as I said, without actually, if we did make cuts to the budget. But as we just showed you, that's obviously not true. Obviously, there are things in this that you missed and you absolutely could cut. But anyways, this is going to be a really interesting thing to watch, because if the city council speaker and the finance committee chair, two of the most powerful people on the entire New York City Council, are saying no to Mamdani's plan to raise property tax, then what's Mamdani going to do, right? So he's already got a no from Kathy Hochul in terms of raising state income tax. He's got a no from the city council in terms of raising property tax. So literally, he just cannot pass his budget because it wouldn't be balanced. So in that case, will he have to capitulate? Will he have to ultimately just make cuts to the budget? Or are we going to see a New York City government shutdown? I'm not exactly sure, but this is going to be a pretty interesting situation to watch. Just remember through all of it, folks, as we established in this video, Mamdani is lying. This is a fake manufactured crisis. It's almost a false flag in a sense, right? It's a false flag budget crisis in order to ram down his radical left agenda, which includes millions of dollars of DEI that are essential for the city, oh sure, while defunding the police at the same time. Shouldn't be all that surprising. That's all these people do. Manufacture crises, manufacture outrage based on the crises they manufactured, and then use it to ram socialism down your throats. That said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this whole situation in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.